to our meetup tonight on GitHub Actions. Some of what's new and also a bit of an overview of what's really there to help introduce it, provide an overview, and then that'll be used as a platform for what's next. So Steve and I, our presenters tonight, both work for IntelliTalk. IntelliTalk is sponsoring tonight's meetup. There isn't really much to it. If we ever get back to having in-person meetups, we will typically have it at our office and have refreshments and things. So by sponsoring, I think that just means Steve and I showed up tonight, and we've got a nice PowerPoint design template, but that's about it. We are located in Spokane. We're actively hiring senior software developers. So if you are interested or you know somebody's interested, please pass the word along. We are holding meetings now about every other month or so on the third Thursday of the month for whatever reason. I'm not quite sure how it ended up on the third Thursday, but it did. Generally speaking, that's when we'll meet, and about every other month. There's plenty of topics in the space, and hopefully we can generate some interest and get some people to attend and do DevOps stuff. For the moment, we're online only, and you've got the URL. If you found us tonight, you probably have that URL and know about the meetup. We also sponsor the Spokane.net users group. We've run that group for many, many years now. The next session is Tuesday, April 13th. It'll be given by Kevin Bost, who will go over building modern tools with system command line. System command line's library we helped Microsoft build, open source, part of .NET, the new .NET, and can be used to build sophisticated command lines. Think of the power command shells, AZ command line, for example, npm, et cetera, anything that has to do with sophisticated command parsing. So that'll be pretty cool. And Kevin is Microsoft MVP. So tonight, you got Phil and Steve. We both work for IntelliTalk. I do all kinds of different things. Steve does all the fun stuff, senior software architect. So when we have a live Teams meeting here, ask questions, please interact as much as you can, on topic, off topic. Mute yourself when you're not speaking, just to limit the background noise. We are recording. You can use the meeting chat, or heck, you don't need to use the meeting chat. You can just open up your mic and talk directly, whatever you feel like doing. If you have suggestions for future topics, let us know. Also, if you'd like to speak at a future event, you have something of interest, please let us know. We'd love to engage and not just be a few of us who are doing the meetings. Okay, so far so good. Everybody can hear me okay? We'll get into the main content. And for various reasons, I'm running on one screen tonight, so give me a little bit of time here to get my share set up. And we're going to share the whole screen this time. Okay, so GitHub Actions. Let's get into it. We originally envisioned this as what's new in GitHub Actions. There isn't a ton new, but there's a ton that's recent and a ton a lot of different features and functions. We thought it would be good to start with an overview of what GitHub Actions are, and then take a look at the roadmap and do a few demos along the way. So I wouldn't call this in depth, but it is an overview, and I think there's a number of areas that we can explore further in future sessions. That I'd love to explore further into future sessions. So GitHub, if you don't know, has a public roadmap. So they are doing a good job of publishing at least the high level themes, high level feature sets, across the board. And within these, they're using a GitHub project, GitHub issues and items on that project board to do it. So that's kind of cool. And within this, if we do a filter for action, we can see specifically features that they're planning for actions that are coming down the road. And again, there's a few of these that will sort of hit on that are recent, a little bit of visualization, manual approvals, environments, and other more in-depth.
They're actually pretty good at labeling everything. So you could even do label : actions to ensure that you get.
Or not.
I think space, maybe something like that. Anyway.
Yeah, something. There you go.
Action.
So again, the labels are pretty good. You can see that past quarters, they have marked some things shipped. There's some things in this quarter that they've shipped. The January to March quarter. Not everything, but theoretically they'll get everything. Who knows? And then again, you can see off into the future. They're also GitHub also does a pretty good job of docs. I'm not going to go read the docs for you, but there's some good documentation. Generally, there's always gaps, but they're doing a pretty good job of getting documentation updates out and keeping it up to date with the pace that they're moving in actions, and they're moving pretty quickly. So, and again, there's a nice section on GitHub Actions, specifically, quick starts, guides, various for various scenarios as well. And then again, a pretty active community supporting actions and supporting GitHub itself. So if you want to look at specific items that they have up there, so community, are you using runners? Are there categories? Let's see what else is recent there. Splitting steps into different jobs or not? Nobody's really had a comment on that, and I would say it depends. So we'll do a little bit of both tonight. Okay, we'll keep rolling. On the roadmap, you'll notice, actually, if we just pop back here, we'll see that a number of these things are marked GitHub Enterprise or just Cloud, or there's also a GHAC, which is another version of GitHub. And some of the work that's on the backlog isn't necessarily new features for cloud or public repos, but they're implementing those features in their other products or the other versions of GitHub. Not everybody knows there's actually several versions of GitHub, and where they make their money is by selling those versions. And now they have a couple of other ways to monetize as well with actions and artifacts, but that's not where we're here tonight to talk about how they make money or didn't make money. Basically, there's a couple of different versions. You have Enterprise Server, which is GitHub that you can implement on your own, either on-prem or on your own cloud resources, and it has all of your own. You can do all your own. Basically, a protected environment, not in the public cloud. Private by default. There's also an enterprise cloud product, which adds enterprise level features. There's some advanced security features, some analytics, logging analytics, analysis, additional analysis over and above what you get, in free repos. Or if you have private repos and you want to run these things, that'll likely fit into GitHub Enterprise Cloud. So it's still SaaS hosted by GitHub, but you get additional features that you're going to pay for. And then they're coming out with a hybrid product, AE, which is hosted by GitHub, but it's isolated. So has the benefits of GitHub Enterprise Server and the benefits of cloud rolled into one. Because again, you know, we're in the days of cloud. You know, why would I buy a product and host it on-prem when most enterprises, you know, even legacy IT shops are moving their on-prem resources to the cloud. So that's what GitHub AE is about. And again, you'll see these items on the roadmap, you know, doing such and such in GHAC or GitHub GHES. That's really about taking whatever feature that they first pushed into, let's say, made available for public repos on GitHub and making it available in these other instances. Okay, so with that, we'll get into GitHub Actions. So I guess what I'll ask, we have a limited crowd. Let me ask you guys a question. How many of you have, you know what Actions have used Actions? Could be doing this presentation in your sleep. You know, let me know. What do you know?
I haven't heard of them myself until today.
I've used them in kind of a lightweight fashion, you know, pull down some pre-existing ones, kind of piece things together.
Cheers.
I haven't really used them before myself, yeah.
Okay, then our strategy of just a quick overview makes sense. And again, we won't go too in depth here, just provide an overview. So again, the actions are CI/CD. The way GitHub talks about it more often than not is about workflow automation, not just, you know, let's say pigeonholing it into continuous integration and continuous deployment of bits. There's quite a bit of capability around automating even issue management and related services that Steve will get into a little bit later. The actions themselves are relatively new, 2+ years now in existence, but they're built on a foundation of workflow that GitHub had developed earlier that they just had that they used internally to deliver or build features on top of. Then they realized, you know, hey, we got to get into the CI/CD game. Let's build out or expose our workflow automation engine by way of actions, and then came up with this idea of being able to customize and extend their CI/CD with actions. So actions are really the what makes up the core of the workflows. And there's a library of actions available on the web. Again, we'll do a quick look here just to give you an idea of what's there from a variety of providers. You know, typical for CI/CD. What is perhaps atypical is the number of actions that they've been able to get into their marketplace in the span of a couple of years. So, you know, good news is it's easy to build actions. Bad news is it's easy to build actions. So you got to be a little bit careful, right? I mean, you know that, hey, there's the actions here by Docker, Anchor, Axelsoft. So you get that they're, you know, you're going to go to those places first before you go to, you know, Joe's actions. I promise not to steal your secrets. You know, Joe's, I promise not to steal your secret actions. I probably want to stay away from those. So they are coming out with a certification program. I don't, off the top of my head, know exactly where they are with that. So you can have certified actions or, you know, just publicly available actions. The actions do have to be open source. So, you know, if you're going to use one that's open source, obviously inspect the code and, you know, take a look at it and see what it's doing. So again, 7,000 kind of proof that it's easy to, actions are easy to extend, customize, create your own. So again, GitHub Actions are workflows. Workflows are authored in YAML, stored in your repo under GitHub/workflows. and they're triggered automatically by events. So this could be webhook style. There's a number of events that will actually trigger activities, trigger your workflow to run. You can also run them manually, or they can be scheduled like a cron job, on whatever schedule. I don't know what the lower limits are or the upper limits, but you basically can put a cron style syntax in and have your jobs run on a schedule, nightly, hourly, somewhere down in the minutes range. So workflow, drilling in a little bit, workflow itself is comprised of a triggering event, which we talked about. And then within that workflow, you have a number of jobs. You can have one job, you can have two jobs, you can have quite a number of jobs. Within each job, there are steps, and those steps are tied to an action. There's various parameters, values that you can set at each one of those levels. A single job is executed on a runner. That's the agent, wherever that agent is running. And it's going to execute the, download, load up the actions, execute them, log the results, and return those results back to GitHub for you to view. The environment that these run in will have, there's various values or environment values that you can set, and then there's also context. So the environment would be variables. They're going to show up as environment variables actually, but they can be set at the workflow global level, at a job level, at a step level, and then context, what these things are running in, various attributes, values for each of the levels are also available. And then we have runners hosted and self-hosted. So let's do a quick little demo here. I shut down a whole bunch of windows, so it'd be easier to find exactly where I wanted to go. Firefox.
Hey, you say that, but you still have like 20 windows open.
It used to be more. What can I tell you? It's PowerPoint. I should shut down. There's too many PowerPoint windows. Too much PowerPoint, right, Steve? Okay, so I just have a simple React app that was just code gen. There's nothing magic about this code. That isn't really why we're here, but that is the structure of the repo. It's just a general purpose or a starter React app. And within that, as stated, I've got this .GitHub workflows, and within the GitHub workflows, I have YAML files. The extension could be YML or YAML, which represent the workflows that I have in this repo. The first one that I want to look at is just check NPM. It's a fairly simple workflow and follows YAML syntax. And again, it's YAML, so if you get a space off somewhere, expect funny things to happen with the YAML. You can come in here and do an edit, go into edit mode, and it'll do some syntax highlighting for you. So you can see that it recognizes name on jobs, and you'll get red squigglies when something's off when you're doing an interactive edit. I'll show VS Code in a bit. There's a VS Code extension which for GitHub Actions, which is pretty much a must-have as well. It'll give you some of the red squigglies, though it doesn't do as good a job, but there's the advantage of it being in VS Code. So if we just look at the YAML itself, we have a name. So this is the name of my my action, and we'll see that show up in the list of actions when we go there. On workflow dispatch, that's basically means manual, manually triggered. We'll take a look at a couple of other triggers, maybe just one or two other triggers, and some filtering that you can do on these things as well. And then I have jobs. In here I have two jobs. I have check BATS version, which is the Bash automated testing framework. This is just their canonical sample that they have in place. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's just something. runs on Ubuntu. So this is going to run on a runner provided by GitHub. They have Ubuntu, various flavors of Ubuntu, Windows, Mac OS, that you can run your jobs on. It then uses a couple of syntax shortcuts to specify actions or steps. It's going to run 4 steps. The first step is it's going to run is a checkout step. So it's going to use the the checkout action to check out code. I don't know that it really needs to check out code in this scenario, but that's what's going to happen. Then it's going to set up Node so that I can use the npm Node Package Manager in the next step. I'm then going to run, which is another shortcut for run a shell script. By default, this is going to be bash. There's additional parameters that you could specify here with more syntax to specify command line or PowerShell, depending on your environment and what you want to run. So this is a step with or 4 steps, 4 different actions, a checkout, a setup, just a PowerShell to run npm and a PowerShell to run bats. Once it's installed, then I can spit out a version of bats. Then there's another sample here. This other job, check context, that actually runs on a self-hosted. So it's actually going to run, again, this is self-hosted because that's what I called it. Maybe not the best name, but this is actually running on my laptop. And it would run the same virtually, whether it's on my laptop or hosted by GitHub. The obvious advantage of having it run on my laptop, or some of the advantages of having it run on my laptop, is I control the environment. So if I have special tools I want to install, I can do that. And 2, if, for example, I'm doing a deployment, maybe my job is to install a web server. If I don't want to give GitHub access to that web server, but I'm okay giving access to that web server from my laptop, hey, run the job on your self-hosted runner. So it's a good way to do deployments when you need that extra level of security, or that extra level of security is demanded and that's true these days by most customers. The rest of this, again, are steps here. That's just a bit more syntax, a few more parameters on my step. You can see here that I'm just going to run a shell script, but I've got a couple of setup steps here. So I give it a name so I can track it. Very nice. And then with this environment, I'm telling it, hey, this step is going to use the GitHub context, and I'm gonna go grab that context and convert it into JSON so that I can see it. And that's provided to this step. It doesn't actually do well. It spits out, it's at least $GitHub context. But you'll see when we look at the run, you'll see the sort of differences there. And then we just go on down the road here with some sample of dumping context from steps, the runner itself. What can you tell me about the runner? Then there's also strategies. So the actions will support different strategies, like a matrix strategy. For example, I'm building an app, and I need to build it for multiple different target browsers or multiple different environments. I can run the same set of steps through different strategies. So I don't have to reproduce a whole bunch of steps if they're going to be the same every time, except for what a target environment might be when I do my build. And that's about it. Matrix strategy. What is my dev strategy? What's my matrix context look like? And again, I may or may not have a sample of that. I'm not sure. Steve may or may not have a sample of it, but it's kind of cool if you're doing that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the actions. tab. So I've got code issues across, GitHub UI. I'm going to go down to my run checks, and we can see some of the runs that were done. If I just grab the last one, and actually, why don't I just go ahead and run this, because hey, it's a manual workflow. If it's a manual workflow, if you have that on trigger to workflow dispatch, you'll get this run workflow option. So I can just go ahead and run it. There are ways to add parameters. So if you have parameters for your workflow, they'll show up as prompts when you run. So that's kind of cool. So that's going to go off and run. When I drill into this, I'm seeing two different jobs. If I click a job, again, there's two different views of those jobs. If I click a job, I can see all the things that it did. So it did the setup. It performed my actions for checkout, actions for setting up node, ran the npm install, ran the bats. If I expand that, I can see that the bats version that it downloaded was 1.3. So, and this gives you an idea of just what shell script did it run. Obviously, this is a simple example, so not too much there. And then any post-run actions that are required, any cleanup that's required, uploading the logging, cleaning stuff up. I have a second job here, which is the check context, which has all these context dumps. And if I drill into, say, the GitHub context, what it's telling me is that context is users Phil Spokas, which is the my user and my local machine. So they just echoed that $GitHub context. But I also grabbed the GitHub context and made it available to the steps to use, and you can see all the various things that are available to you in that context. Interesting things to know, or things that you might want to know or need to know. Head ref, base ref, what the name of the workflow is, who the actor. I'm the person who fired off this workflow, so that might be important to you. Might be used for logging or whatever you want to do in your actions, and then all kinds of other fun stuff that are going to be useful in various scenarios that you're going to use to build actions. Is that making sense? Questions? Answers? I'll keep rolling. Strategy here, there wasn't really any strategy. Cool. And again, you can see some default values here that, again, are going to make more sense in a more complicated environment. And I think this matrix is probably just going to show a matrix of nothing, because there isn't a matrix, but you can set up a build matrix to run that step multiple times. Okay, so that's kind of the high-level intro. Talked about YAML, what it looks like, triggers, and etc. I've got another one here that I'll show real quickly, which is just a more classic continuous integration for this simple little My React app. And you can see when I click on this, you'll see the history that this is run. Most recent runs have been set to run on dev, a dev branch, update 1, update 2. Prior were set to run on master. And what I'm going to do is just quickly show what that looks like. If you go to build, this is my CI build, # for hash for comments. I gave this a name, and here I've got a different trigger. I'm going to say I'm going to run this on a push to the branches that I specify. In this case, I'm going to say dev/star. If I'm just doing a build, I don't want that to run all the time. I only want it to run on branches. I could further filter this to say only execute if I commit code to certain folders, and et cetera. In this case, I'm saying, hey, only one when I push to dev branch. So, that was a change I made, a few builds ago. So you can see that the runner transitioned from running on master to running just on the dev branches. And I put the asterisk in there, so it's going to run on any dev branch that I trigger. Just to drill down on this a bit, again, we see the jobs. I name the job build, and then I say, hey, it's going to run on Ubuntu again. Here I've got a strategy, and I'm going to say run these commands through multiple different versions of Node. So that's my strategy for the job. So take all the steps, run them through 10, 12, 14, 15, make sure that it's good across all those versions. And then for the steps, again, I've got this uses shortcut to say, check out my code. I then have a set up node step. Here, instead of just using the straight action, I add with clause and node version, which is going to be pulled from the node version. So it's going to execute the setup for each of those node versions. After that, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to npm commands, run the build, run my test to verify that things are working. If I put in bad code, build starts failing, then I'll get failures. And I can do all kinds of other fancy stuff with this, but fairly straightforward build. Okay.
Real quick, Phil, if you can go back to that.
Yep.
One of the really nice things about this workflow is that we can have all this stuff running directly in GitHub. So, a lot of libraries I've been worked on, I've had complex like Circle CI setups or whatever to run however many different versions of Node or different operating systems, stuff like that. And really, the less platforms, the less tools you have, it really helps help you focus on the stuff that you're actually trying to do, which is deliver code, update code, and less on managing all these different dependencies across the repo that you have to constantly manage. So
yeah, for sure. That the integrated aspect of it, I think that's where we do a lot of Azure DevOps work. The story with Azure DevOps was always, if your needs don't require going outside the box, stay in the box because it's pre-integrated, it's built in, and that's certainly the case here. They've added a lot of features in the last couple of years, so they're getting feature parity, but they don't have feature parity with some of these other CI tools and deployment tools. They're getting there pretty quickly. So part of it is some of the elegance of their architecture. So cool. Okay, so that's sort of the high-level overview. There's a lot you can do with it. There's a lot of different things that we can drill into in addition. One of the newer features that they've added is our environments. And with that comes a couple of additional features around reviewers or manually reviewing and then setting secrets for different environments. There isn't a ton of documentation. There isn't a ton there, but there's let's say the starting point of more complexity down the road. And this isn't really doing much in the way of deployments yet. Again, there's some initial features for helping to manage deployments, but right now, what is there are environments. So, and just to take a look at what those environments are, I'm going to go over to my settings tab, go down and click on environments, and I have 3 environments set up here. I have a dev and a test. And in my dev environment, I don't have any, basically what we can do in an environment is set up required reviewers, wait timers, I want to wait a specified time before I go from environment to environment, for example. You might have a settling time, allow the app to run, your solution to run for a while, generate logs, make sure it's working, it's running. Required reviewers would be a manual review. Generally speaking, we want to avoid these things, but sometimes you need them. So there's that opportunity. We can also specify deployment branches that we're only going to deploy to this environment from certain branches. You can set that up in a couple of different ways, but it can also be set up within the environment, further protection. The other thing that we can do here is have environment-specific secrets. So in this scenario, I've got a web app that I'm deploying to Azure. I've got two different services that I'm deploying to a dev environment, a test environment, and each of those has a different publish profile, which is effectively the secrets for publishing. If I go ahead and click update here, I'm not going to see anything. I previously grabbed the profile and pasted it in here, and I'm not going to mess with it at the moment. But this is an environment-specific secret. So Dev has got this Azure web app publish profile. If I go to test, for test, I added a required reviewer. Added myself as a reviewer, because why not? And again, I've got the same secret, but it's for the test environment. And that when I set the profile, I set it based on the published profile that Azure gave me for that app. And if I look at the app, you'll see how stunning this app really is. Just a sample React app with a little bit of text thrown in to track where the heck we're at. And my dev environment is just a sample CRM-my app, Azure Websites.net. And I've got another instance here, which is got the dash test on it. Right now, they're at the same version. So with that, I'm going to switch over to VS Code. And I've already created a update 2 branch. You guys don't need to see that. I'm on update 2. I'm going to go into the code. And I'm just going to go into app.js and this is probably the most rocking code you're going to see in the next 3 minutes. So just say, yeah, test, I'm on test 8, update 2. While I'm here, notice that I've cloned my r-app repo, my-r app, whatever, you get it. I've cloned it locally so I can use VS Code on it. What we're going to be looking at next is the deploy.yaml. And you'll see syntax highlighting here as well because I have the GitHub extension loaded. You also see some red squigglies because it's confused. So it's not perfect. This deployment actually does work. I can make changes here as well if I want to use VS Code versus the UI on GitHub. So I've made my change. I'm going to do a git commit here, get that stuff upped, add some linter stuff I fixed earlier. What am I doing? Update 8. And we'll do a git push, and that's going to get the ball rolling on at least part of this workflow. Let's see. Oh, if we go back to my actions, I have a number of actions running. You'll see that push for update 8 fired off a linter job that I've got, fired off my CI job to make sure that it's going to build, and anything else that I trigger on that. And that's it. That's all that's running. I do have these others, right? We said run checks. That runs manually. It's not going to run. And my deploy is going to be run whenever I push to master. Notice that it's not pull request. You can have this, your builds trigger on pull request as well to participate in that validation of a pull request. Here, I'm making sure that the build is clean when I push to my dev branch, and then when I do a pull request, maybe I'll add some additional reviews. But when I deploy, I want to deploy anything that hits master or main. As soon as it hits main, it's good to go, right? I know I'm going to trust that any of the review that needs to get done, any of the preconditions that need to get done are going to get done. So if I go in to pull request, I'm going to do a new pull request, and we're going to say update 2. And yeah, made that 7 to 8 and 1 to 2 change. So I'm going to go ahead and create the pull request. Create pull request. Lots of points and clicks, some checks. Yeah, superlinter hasn't run, but I know it's going to fail. There's also some additional analysis that can be done. I'm going to let Steve talk about that though. And I'm going to go ahead and short circuit this and merge the pull request. So confirm the merge. All set, so I'm merged. So now if I look at my actions, we'll see that my deploy app job has kicked off. So if I click on deploy app from here, I'm going to filter this list for all the deploy app runs. You know, they're not, hey, I'm not perfect. What can I tell you? But several of them are green. And actually, this got triggered. Not sure why that got triggered, but we'll take a look at it. What I set up in this was 3 steps. So I took the build, split it out from dev, split it out from test, and I made 3 different jobs. You know, not one big long job, but 3 different jobs. And there's a good reason for that. Let's pop back to my YAML. Firstly, I have named, actually, yeah, whatever. I didn't really need to name this environment. It's not really doing anything for me because all I'm doing is building. So checking out the code, using Node. I am running NPM. I'm doing a build, and then I'm actually going to upload the build to a build, upload the build, and the build is in the build path. So I'm using an environment. It's an environment variable, environment variable. I just keep saying that, and I'm building for Node version 10.x. So because this environment is at the top, it's scoped to the entire job, all the jobs, this entire workflow. So again, I'm just doing a build. I'm pushing that build up to artifact. That artifact is then going to be available for download in the future. Build it once, deploy it often. That isn't always true these days, especially with web development and especially with React development. A lot of times you've got to build for dev, build for test, build for whatever. You got to build things differently, but that's a different story. My next job, and again, I'm at the job level, so this is a whole new job. It's going to run on its own instance of a runner, Ubuntu latest dev environment, and I'm going to say it needs build. So I can't run this job until the build job runs and the build job succeeds. And you see that in the sort of the dependency graph that is built out for us in that visual, the visual, which is somewhat recent, by the way, the visual display. It's a somewhat new feature. Here, I'm also going to define an environment variable. I'm going to tell it the name of the app is sample crm-my r-app, right? That's the name of my web app for dev. Should be a dev on there, but hey, ignore that. And then I'm just going to run a couple of steps here. I'm going to download the build. I'm I gave the build a name up here, or the artifact. I gave the artifact a name of build. So I'm going to download that artifact and name the build, and I'm going to put it in the build directory, which is where my deployment is expecting it. My next step is going to be deploying to Azure. So I'm going to use a action provided by Microsoft Azure to do a web app deployment. They have a number of actions that they provide. I could use Bob's deploy to Azure. I promise I won't steal your secrets, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the Azure, the one that's coming from Azure. And then I provide an app name, and the dollar mustaches, double mustaches are the variable substitution. So it's going to take my environment variable, substitute it. My published profile, here I'm grabbing a secret, and I'm grabbing it from the secret store. So secrets dot whatever. There's a couple of different ways I can specify secrets. I can create them globally across all my accounts. I can create them for a repo. I can also create them for an environment. You saw that I had Azure Web App published profile. It knows which secret to grab because I specified development environment. So it's going to grab the dev secret, and then it's going to use that package to do the deployment. So similarly in test, I'm going to do pretty much the same thing. A couple of differences. I'm specifying the test environment, and I give it a app name of test. Again, there are ways that I could, probably further templatize this, or if I'm doing this often enough and there's enough logic in here, I can wrap this into a custom task of my own making, and then leverage that in my workflow. Okay, does that make sense? And if I go back, we'll see I've got a build and deploy. Dev is dependent on the build, and test is dependent on the dev, and test is waiting. And why is test waiting? Because I've been requested to review this. So theoretically, here I'd go take a look. Maybe I'd look at dev and see, is it running okay? Are people okay to receive test? Is the QA team ready to receive test? Whatever it is I've got to do, whatever reason I put in here for manual, and then I can review just click on review and say, yep, good to go. And go segs. And we'll approve and deploy. So that'll make its way out. So if I go up here, I hit refresh. My test data has been deployed here. Depending on how quickly I hit refresh, it's still 7. This goes pretty quickly in my experience, unless of course you're doing a demo, and it takes forever. It's just how things go. Now he's done it enough that he questions what the heck's going on here. Set it deployed. Oh, sorry, that was the previous one. Yeah, that's what happens. So if we go to deploy my R app, there was actually 2 started. This one was holding on to that code from before, right? So it kicked off this action, grabbed an instance of my code. The instance of my code was from update 7, not update 8. So when I deployed, it updated 7. However, this guy had already started, so he deployed 8. This is fun. This is awesome. You follow that? You believe me? I can prove it if I needed to. But we're going to go ahead and deploy this. And just say, go ZAGS exclamation, approve and deploy. Then again, we can click into this and see it running its steps. I approved. Yes, thank you very much. So set up the job, and we'll execute the steps. So you can watch this from here. You can also see the jobs, the steps running interactively on this graph. So you can imagine that's going to be handy when you've got a bigger graph. And now this time for sure, I hit refresh and bang zoom, we got 8. Whoa. Okay, so quick intro, a little bit of new stuff, and GitHub Actions.
I know you just kind of blasted everyone with GitHub Actions. Lots of syntax, lots of clicking around, lots of steps. But
yes,
even if you don't internalize everything, I hope you could at least take away from what Phil just showed you how quick and how fast it is to make changes or get things going. If you've ever spent time managing TeamCity or Azure DevOps, those processes are a lot more involved, or the speed at which you could just integrate the changes, reincorporate it, rerun builds or deployments or checks. It's really nice. That's the one thing for as immature as this ecosystem still is. I think that, starting when they did a year and a half, 2 years ago, they had a lot to learn from and a lot of examples to kind of pick apart. And so it's a really nice ecosystem, if not for, all of the faults it may have for being pretty young still.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, I did blast through some things, but it didn't take very long at all to put those things together. There's a little bit of learning curve, as with anything. YAML's takes a little bit of getting used to, but these things really don't take very long to get together. There are some soft spots, let's call them, in the documentation. But again, once you get used to things, it rolls pretty quickly. Very easy to change. So, Steve, I'm going to pass it off to you.
I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Great. So one of the things that I kind of want to talk about, instead of necessarily going over what's new, because most of you haven't really had a lot of experience, I wanted to first talk about some of the newer security scanning features that have been integrated into GitHub Actions. And so there are a few things that have existed for a long time that are kind of community sponsored. So I think Dependabot and some of those checks, those kind of existed naturally before any of GitHub Actions kind of came to being. GitHub Actions has done a pretty good job of incorporating some of these status checks. So the two I wanted to kind of quickly show were code scanning analysis and finding security vulnerabilities in your code itself, and then finding vulnerabilities in your dependencies, which you may not have as what would the word be? As much visibility, like upfront visibility. It's really hard to know, for something like a Node application or any sort of JavaScript application, for the hundreds of dependencies you may have, does one of those have a vulnerability? And NPM has kind of also kind of kicked in to up the game as far as alerting you if there are vulnerable packages in your repo. So I created this pull request, and it's just this demo repo of mine. And so there's two things I wanted to point out. one is that I added this package for 3.js. I had to go searching for some vulnerable stuff, but just to kind of call out, so this npm package has had some sort of vulnerability at some point. It got corrected at version maybe 1.121, around there. And the other file I wanted to show is, I just added this file called pwn.js. It's just a file of a whole bunch of random bad things that you can do in JavaScript. So I just kind of found this in a repo. But part of the build process I set up, so I set up a workflow to do code analysis. I can't remember, Phil, if you showed this workflow template.
I did not.
But GitHub provides this workflow, this action, kind of as a service, which is really nice, because I've done some enterprise applications and start lowering my desk. I worked on some enterprise applications, and they were spending gobs of money for other security suite tools to do the same thing, to just analyze some JavaScript code. And so with this workflow set up, I have it set up to run on any push and on any, so it's set up on 2 events, so 2 webhooks, on a push and on a pull request. And I specify the branches I want it to run against as well. And then it'll also run on a schedule, right? Because you don't necessarily want to wait to find out that you have a vulnerable package or some vulnerability if that code doesn't change for months at a time, right? The code could have been fine in January of 2020, but come January 2021, if you haven't changed that code for some reason, and a vulnerability has been discovered, you don't want to wait for somebody to make a change to trigger that security workflow. So on top of that, and I don't know if any of you configure this, there's a security tab where you could set up two of these important security settings. One is for Dependabot alerts. So if you have Dependabot able to evaluate your dependencies, it will alert you of issues there, and also code scanning. I somehow was able to find an issue in their flow. So I'm going to look at Phil's repo just to kind of show what the scanning alert would look like. So I created the same pull request in Phil's repo, and because it's just a pull request, I don't have any active alerts as part of my part of the repo itself, but it will say that, hey, in this PR, there was an alert found. And so let's look at the results of that. So this is added as a check, right? This is a requirement as part of accepting a pull request. Now, because I don't have my master branch protected, so I'm able to merge this pull request even with these security vulnerabilities. If I had my branch protected, which you normally would want to do, the pull request would be blocked until this issue is resolved. So we can see that it's failing code scan. So if we pull that up, so it's really nice. It'll show us where in the code the issue was. It will also give us more documentation onto why it is an issue. All right, so we have some unsanitized zip archive item path. I thought there was a link to more information about the error itself. There we go. So yeah, so we can look at this alert. We could see exactly where in the source code the security vulnerability is. We can see why it's vulnerable. How to There we go. So we have all these examples of how to fix it, how to mitigate it, which is super nice. That's a lot of domain knowledge to kind of get for free. And I say free, so these tools are available for free on public repos. That's right, Phil. So if I have this as a private repo, I don't get any of this stuff for free out of the box, at least for the free plans, the free tiers. I don't know if the pro tiers offer any added bonuses for these. Of course, a lot of the enterprise plans will include this as well. So that's the first part, is showing the actual code, issues within the code. The other is dependency issues. So this is still in beta, but this is a new feature that I wanted to touch on. So right now, when you're looking at your whatever your dependency file is, so for this JavaScript application, it's my package.json. I can view what's called the rich diff of the file, and it's doing dependency review. And here we can see that this dependency in 3.js that we had just added as part of this pull request is capable of causing denial of service in our application. And it links to the specific advisory where we can get more information. We could see up here, so affected versions were all versions before 0.125, patched in 0.125. So again, we're getting a bunch of this knowledge for free, right? On what issues we have in our app, what I need to do to fix it. And it's relatively easy to do, right? So I hop back, update my versions, run whatever local test, make a push, and I'll get past these security issues pretty quickly. The other, let's see here. All right. Those are the key dependency and security points I wanted to touch on. The other new feature that came out was the ability to limit which branches can deploy to which environment. And Phil, I can't remember if you showed this specifically.
I did not show it. I glossed over it.
Sure. So in my environments, I just have two fake environments, one for prod, one for test. And I have a protection rule set up on prod such that says only the master branch is allowed to deploy to production. So if I go to my actions, I tried to deploy, to make a deployment to production. And part of this pull request that I had was I introduced an update in my workflow. I guess it's going to be in the main branch now. I made a change to my deployment workflow, so that I had a workflow to deploy to the test environment, but I changed the environment to point to prod. And so normally this would be a very bad thing to do, right? To have your test branch able to deploy to prod. Just, you were doing some copy pasta, you copied a workflow from somewhere else, you forgot to update the environment, somebody accidentally clicks deploy to test, and all of a sudden you have a broken or incorrect application in prod. So normally this would happen just fine, but since we set up that protection rule on our prod environment, we'll see that would actually fail. So here was our attempt to deploy to test with that change, and we'll see here that even though the workflow, the YAML is all correct, in normal circumstances we would have been just fine. having that branch protection set up, or that environment protection set up, kind of saved ourselves here. So, real quick, does anybody have any questions, or is there anything that you wanted maybe to see some specifics on for any of these topics on actions or security or vulnerability scanning? There's not a whole lot more to it that I think would be getting too far in depth of today's presentation, but be happy to kind of focus on a couple key issues.
How does it test for like new vulnerability so that show up that like you were talking about, like if you want to update your production with any new patches that come through, how are you testing for that in like workflows?
Right, so the workflow testing is pretty much built in to GitHub itself. And each tool is going to be a little bit different. As far as I'm aware, if you can see, let's see. If you could see my, oh, wrong screen. Most dependency management tools or those ecosystems have some way of tracking vulnerabilities, right? So here's my repo. I can run npm audit just locally, outside of GitHub or anything like that. And this should tell me that, yep, I have one high severity vulnerability. So when I run this command locally, or when GitHub does it, they're ultimately using the same source of information to determine were there vulnerabilities. So this links to an npm advisory. We were looking at a GitHub specific page, but it is also getting the same information from kind of essentially the same source. They're all kind of sharing this, these databases. The code scanning part, it's interesting. So they have this project application called CodeQL, and you can actually build on top of it to create your own analyzers. I think it's a Java application, but as far as I'm aware, it's walking, the syntax trees of whatever your language is. There's only a handful of supported languages at this point, but again, it's mapping against a database of patterns. If you find a regex that looks kind of like this, it's checking a list of potential issues. I thought I had a list of those. So here, so they have a project page for CodeQL. Writing CodeQL queries. If I recall, it's almost like a SQL-y kind of syntax that you end up building. So if you can imagine trying to write like a SQL statement, but against code, select. So for JavaScript, I don't know, you'd be targeting something like, from these files, select anything where regex, you see new regex with a certain pattern, something like that. So the analysis is only as good as the interpreters, and then from there it's only as good as the set of rules that it can really target. How well it can try to extract information out of your source code. Does that answer your question? Does she have any questions?
Yeah, sorry, had a meltdown there for a minute.
Like,
Yeah, that's interesting. Cool. So it's kind of out of other repos that exist. Nice.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm boring. I know. And there's other tools. So SonarQube is another proprietary tool that is expensive and can run same sort of deal. What's really nice about CodeQL is that and this is one of the benefits of GitHub is because this is something that's free for public repos. So people have kind of an interest in adding back to this platform, trying to make it better, which you don't really see happen a lot for walled garden platforms like SonarQube, which I may be giving them an unfair shake. Hi.
Do you have any questions?
So, yeah. Another point I wanted to talk about, kind of similar to that is, if any of you have spent significant time in Azure DevOps. So I was a Azure DevOps evangelist for a while. I loved the pipelines and build systems. I think they kind of took some missteps. They moved to a YAML system very similar to what GitHub has implemented. And then here we see, Microsoft has acquired GitHub. Now they're coming out with, all of these same features that Azure DevOps provides. And I think that the end of life of, new things coming to Azure DevOps pipelines and builds and releases is coming to a close here pretty quick, and they're going to probably start consolidating more towards GitHub Actions, and that's really nice because the ecosystem. I guess my point here is that the ecosystem in GitHub Actions I think has a lot more potential. Like I said, because it's newer, it had a chance to learn a lot of the mistakes of some of their predecessors. The marketplace is really nice. One of my complaints with the Azure DevOps pipelines were the out of the box supported rules. I felt them often to be lacking, and the ability to update them or kind of customize them was harder than it should have been. When you go to, if you want to add a new action, if you want to add actions to your, is this going to give me the nice editor? No. We'll just edit one. If you want to add a new workflow to your project, there we go. It provides access to the marketplace right here. And the marketplace is good. There's a lot of companies that have brought their own actions to GitHub. But the best part about it is that GitHub has authored a ton of really solid actions themselves, right? So I'm less likely to want to add actions to my repo that can affect my environment or potentially have access to the environment secrets or anything like that if it's from some random person that potentially has everybody's best interest at heart, but that code is also susceptible to vulnerability. So kind of having GitHub championing a lot of the built-in stuff, it's really nice. What else? What else, Phil?
I think, from my point of view, we covered a lot. I think we're good. If there's deep dives that we can go on in a number of different ways. Whether it's compare or contrast with other tools, or there's things we didn't talk about. Container, either building facilities for building containers or facilities for using containers to build. Deployment areas, caching. There's ways to cache. You can specify a cache.
Yeah, it really
for
is
your
sky's the limit.
packages.
If you have a need for something, you can MacGyver it in. The support for containers is huge, I think, because it makes it so easy to automate and run the same kind of setup that you have locally or through a GitHub workflow. Real quick, I wanted to show, I'm not sure if we added this link to our PowerPoint, but the syntax for those workflow files is all defined here. To me, this is the place to go for trying to figure out, well, how do I build one of these YAML files? And actually, I think that it's the best place to go to kind of start looking and see what you're even able to do, because you get everything kind of in one spot. We didn't really spend a whole lot of time looking at the specifics of our PowerPoint. We put a bunch of links in here because we mostly wanted something exciting happened. we mostly wanted to just kind of get into GitHub and kind of show you that stuff. So these links have lots of good information. If you're still interested, I recommend checking those out. But really, if you have a GitHub repo, it's very simple to add some workflows to that repo that are going to give you some quick value, even if it's just doing the security scanning, the dependency scanning, stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
save you from yourself.
Having it built in, security, shifted as far left as you can get it, which is where it needs to be. Finding this stuff early, it's easy to bump version numbers, and again, Dependabot's going to do a lot of it for you. But some of the code scanning, get it as early as possible. Again, it's right there, so it's nice. They're continuing to improve, so there are some of these things are, let's say, rudimentary, but they're still there. And as Steve said, there's ways to do manual approvals before, but it involved PRs and issues, and sometimes that flow is still relevant. The notification was just in that build. There's no notification, so that's going to need to be something that's coming. Though there are events, there's APIs, so there's lots of ways that you can hook it and build it yourself. So, meaning how do I know that they're waiting for me to approve a release? Well, I got to go look at it. So, out of the box, that's the out of the box experience anyway. So plenty more stuff, plenty more opportunities for the GitHub team to improve and update actions.
We'll post our slides. We'll have these public repos open for a bit, so you can check out how we built them. You can check out the things that we've shown you. We're always around. If you have questions, just shoot us an email, and we're always around to answer questions, stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah.
And again, if there's future topics, an area we want to drill into more, we'd love to do it. So let us know, or if you want to do it, that's also good. Okay.
Yeah, nice job, guys.
Well, thanks to you all for.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll see you next time.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.
Hey, it was good to see you, man.
Yep. Thank you.